Hey, it's Heather Chauvin, wife, mother of 3 boys, former social worker, breadwinner, recovering hustler, and stage 4 cancer survivor. I'm not a fan of that term, by the way. Beyond all of these titles and labels, I'm a human being, just like you, attempting to navigate it all while feeling good. My goal on this podcast is to show you that you can live an energized, sustainable life both at home and in your work. It doesn't matter if you stay at home full time, if you work from home, you're a CEO, a successful business owner, or trying to find some inspiration. On this show, I attempt to keep it real with stories, interviews, and random thoughts. This is not a business or career podcast, and it's not a parenting podcast. It's both and so much more. You will laugh. You may even cry, and you may even get a little frustrated with the truth you've been hiding from yourself. I believe all human behavior is a language, whether it's through your child's behavior, your health, or a relationship. And when we learn to listen instead of react, we begin to understand what it truly means to feel alive and in control. It's time to put your big girl pants on and find your brave. Let's go. All right, ladies, I am super excited to introduce today's podcast guests with you. We have 2. We have Miss Jennifer, that is not her name. Her name is Miss Jennifer Fink. She is a freelance journalist who regularly writes about boys for national outlets, including U.S. News, World Report, The Washington Post, Parents Parade, and Scholastic Teacher. And Jennifer is also a mother of 4 boys, so her and I have a lot in common. And then her co-host, who is Miss Janet Allison. Janet is the author of Boys Alive. She used to be she's a retired Waldorf teacher, and just a dear, dear friend of mine. I love her to pieces. Janet and I have known each other for a very long time. And Janet and Jennifer are the co-founders or the co-hosts of the On Boys podcast. So that's On, O-N, Boys, B-O-Y-S, podcast. Amazing podcast. If you're raising boys, go check it out. So you might be thinking, what do 2 women know about raising boys? Well, that is the name of the game when you are in a caregiver role. But I will tell you, one of the greatest lessons that I have learned from Janet as well, because I knew Janet before I knew Jennifer, is how the male and female brain works differently. And this trickles down into every aspect of our lives, how we parent, how we raise our children, how we see their behavior. And Janet also gave me some amazing tips, years ago when I was struggling and challenged to understand my husband as well. So every time I have Janet on the podcast, and today, having the luxury of having Janet and Jennifer on the podcast, I'm so excited to just dive deeper into this conversation. Now is a unique time to be raising children, from understanding their behaviors to, keeping them at home during a pandemic, and educating our children on world events. So definitely check out their podcast, On Boys. You can check it out on boys-podcast.com. You can find them on Instagram. I will post all the links in the show notes, and let's dive in. But I also want to hear from you. So find me on Instagram at Heather Chauvin _, last name spelled CHAUVIN.com _, and find me on Instagram and send me a DM. I really want to know what your biggest takeaway was from today's episode and what you're doing to implement that in your home. All right, let's dig in. Welcome, ladies, to the podcast.
Great to be here.
Yay.
Good morning.
Miss Janet and Jen from On Boys podcast.
Yep.
Amazing. And you both have your own way of speaking about raising boys. And Jen, I know you are raising boys, and Janet, you've raised boys in the classroom, which is how you got started with Boys Alive.
Mm-hmm.
And Jen, you are on Building Boys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I started Building Boys because I have 4 boys, and learning more about boys and their challenges and their development became necessary for me to survive in my household full of testosterone. And
It was a survival tactic.
It really was, right? And Heather, I know you know exactly what I'm talking about when you look around and you see these little creatures that you helped create doing things that make no sense to you. Like, something is going on here. So I started learning about boys. I started blogging about boys a long time ago as an outlet for myself. Connected with Janet along the way because she was attempting to solve the same problem from a different angle. And
I was attempting to survive in the classroom with those boys. Yep.
It's all about survival, isn't it?
Survival and understanding. I mean, I really wanted to dive into why these boys could not sit still, did crazy things that were completely unpredictable, and what was going on in their heads. And I had moms asking me too, like, I was raised with sisters. What's with my son? I don't know what's going on. So that was the puzzle that was presented to me back in the mid-90s. And I've been studying ever since. And met Heather along the way, met Jen along the way, and am happy to have been podcast co-hosting with Jen for 2 years now.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? We start with survival, right? Like, we start seeking out this information to solve a problem that is immediate in our lives. And in my case, it was kids randomly getting up and running and jumping on the couch and tackling each other and wrestling. And Janet, you were seeing things in the classroom that you like, I need to get a handle on this so I can reach these children. And at some point it turns into thriving, right? Like, I started trying to survive, and then I realized I could use the things that I was learning to help my boys and myself and others thrive. And I think that's where we're at right now.
Yeah. Well, and what I too found along the way, and I know you both know this, is it's not just our boys, it's the men in our life too. And it's our style of communication, our expectations from our boys and men around communication. And they're not going to communicate like we do. They're not going to talk about their emotions typically as much as we do. They're not going to go as deep into a topic. They're not going to process out loud, all of those things. And when we know that and understand that, then we can adjust and adapt and really connect with them in a way that is comfortable for them.
I love this. So Janet, I always say that that's exactly what you gave me. I don't know when or where or what really connected, but along the way. So this whole community, I mean, the podcast is called Mom is in Control, typically because the woman that comes here feels out of control and she doesn't know how to get back, quote unquote, in control or alignment. But we all know that when we feel out of alignment or when we're feeling out of control in one area of our lives, what do? We try to control something else. And when you're looking at these small children or adult children and you're like, I do not understand you. Why are you so weird? Why are you so different? And not only that, it's one thing to think that yourself, but when you're getting that feedback from the outside world,
yes,
this is where the conversation really needs to start. Because as a mother of 3 boys who, the youngest is 7, the oldest is 15, I remember the insecurities I had because I didn't understand that, the boy brain is different and that shows up differently in the classroom. That shows up differently with, at home, and feeling like I'm failing because they're coming to me to say, solve this problem. And I'm like, aren't you the experts? Like, shouldn't you know the difference? And nobody ever discussed with me the difference between the male and the female brain. It was like just a personality defect, or let's just, slap a label on your child. So I would love to know if you had, I guess I'm starting from macro conversation. But if you had to like 3 bullet points, what would you say the main conclusions you both have come to realize about kind of raising boys or understanding, the little boy, the big boy?
I always say that everything is physical first. He needs to move his body. When his body is moving, his brain is moving. But what do we do in school? We tell kids to sit still. Well, that is the immediate off switch for a boy's brain. So if you want him to talk, do something together. If you want him to find words and his emotions, move your body. He needs to move his body.
One of them for me has been that boys feel ignored and unappreciated. They feel unseen. So partly due to what Janet just said, those boys sitting in the classroom who are getting in trouble for wiggling and moving when they're 5 and 6, 4 even, when they're 4 years old, they are getting this message that there is something wrong with them. In the same way, Heather, you kind of were getting these messages, and I did too, from society at large, like, what is wrong with your heathen children? Can't you control them? And that takes a toll on their souls, their psyches, their self-image. And realizing that has helped me be much more deliberate about seeing and appreciating their skills, their energy, their gifts for what it is, instead of, trying to slot them into this sit still mode that doesn't serve them well.
Mm-hmm. I want to hop on that society at large piece, because I work with a lot of parents who get the call from school. You need to have him tested. I'm working with a mom right now who the kids aren't even in school, but they want their son tested to get ready for next year.
I already got one of those calls during quarantine.
You got one of those too?
Yeah, during quarantine, not even in school.
Yeah. So when you have more information, because of course the school is the authority, right? So you tend to think, oh, I have to do this thing. Well, you don't have to do that thing of having him tested. That is one place where when you're solid in your boy knowledge, you are more able to engage in that conversation and say, actually, no, I think he's fine, or we're going to wait, all those things. But the other place where I hear that there is judgment for moms of boys especially is from moms of girls.
Tell me about that.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. So I do a lot of talks, and I did a talk at a preschool years ago, many years ago. And then I returned maybe 4 years later. And this mom came up to me afterwards, and she kind of had this chagrined look on her face. And she said, I heard you talk the first time, and I only had a girl at that time. So I was kind of like, oh yeah, that's interesting. And she let it go. And then the second time she heard me talk, now she has a 3-year-old boy. And she was like, oh, I get it now. But I hear from moms of boys that moms of girls don't get it, don't understand, like, why can't you settle him down? Why is he so rambunctious? And so we're all moms. We're all in this. We got to take care of each other.
Mm-hmm. I love this conversation, and I'm sure somebody is listening saying, but what do I do? What do I do? And, looking in hindsight in my career as a mother in the last 15 years, I still feel like a beginner every day, because there's always new seasons and new, like, whoa, what is this? What happened here? Something I just heard you say, Janet, is, okay, you have this boy knowledge, right? Now we understand the difference between male, female, brains, energy, whatever. And okay, I have this knowledge, but then you have to like intuitively trust yourself to bring that to someone else who might not have that boy knowledge. So what do you say to that person that's just sitting there so overwhelmed, saying, okay, now I understand that my boy is different and he needs to be taught different, but I don't have time to do that. Like, here I am stuck. Well, right now we're recording this in isolation. And like, where do you even begin to navigate this world with that information.
Janet, how about you talk about how to have that conversation with teachers and stuff, and I'll handle the what to do on the home front.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I think that just armed with some knowledge is helpful. If your son is young, understanding that going to school on the older side is setting him up for success. So starting school later, because boys and girls, and we're talking broad generalizations, are on different developmental trajectories. And boys need that time in early childhood to play and move their bodies and just be out in nature and be boys. And so starting school later is much better. And knowing the school program, what are the expectations in school, is essential. And knowing whether your son's teacher is boy friendly is also essential.
I found myself laughing.
Questions. How do you ask? Hey, are you boy friendly?
Well, there's many ways you can look at the classroom and just see if it's boy friendly or not. If there's room to move around, if there's opportunities to move, how much recess time do they get during the day? Do they get to go out and move their bodies before school even begins? Those kinds of things are really important to understand for your boy.
You can sometimes pick it up in random conversation too. I have such a distinct memory of going to the preschool, go in, drop off your supplies, meet your teacher, classroom event with my youngest son when he was in 3rd grade. And I don't even remember exactly what she said, but his teacher, who at that point she had a daughter and she had a son who was about 3 years old. And the way she was talking about her son, it became so apparent to me, who at that point was a mother of 4 boys with the youngest going into 3rd grade, that she does not get boys. She is frustrated by his energy. She doesn't know what he's doing. And right then and there, I thought, well, this will be an interesting year. And guess what? This was an interesting year. I didn't have a lot of other options at that point. And so many of us boy parents do find ourselves in that situation, right? So you may not have a lot of choice as to where you send your son to school. Janet, I had to laugh when you're talking about, learning about the school environment, because Lord knows none of us imagined what's going on right now. None of us thought, I will choose this at-home program. Stuff happens.
I will choose to be in charge of this at-home program.
Right?
No, thank you.
So that's all great advice. And sometimes you can't really find a great school environment for your son. Right. And that has been the reality for most of the 20 plus years that I've been raising boys now. And so I think it is super important that parents advocate for their sons at school for things like recess and movement and incorporating their interest into the curriculum. And at the same time, I think we as parents can do a lot to support them at home, because so often their interests aren't respected at school. So giving them time and space to follow their personal passions at home can make a huge difference. Janet's heard me talk many times about my youngest son, who's now 14, and he's super into machines and lawnmowers and engines and 4-wheelers. And 1/3 of my garage is Sam's. Like, he takes apart things, he builds things, he spends all kinds of time out there. And none of that fits into a traditional elementary school or middle school curriculum, but it's learning and it's super important. And he is developing confidence in himself and his skills. So when our boys aren't getting that at school, I think it's extra important that we try and find other ways to support them outside of the traditional school setting.
I was just going to ask you that, and I think you may have answered your question, but how do we support them at home? So how do you oftentimes, and I guess this will be a question for you, Jen, is I will get people asking me, like, how do you get your children motivated, especially during this time? And it could be, might be a question you're asking for like older, children, like the teenager. But yeah, I see it with like the 10-year-old as well. But yeah, just curious your thoughts on like how to motivate and inspire these boys.
I have so many thoughts on motivation. And one is, I truly think that a lot of the apathy that people see and complain about, especially in their tween and teen sons, we squash motivation out of these boys routinely. We spend the first part of their lives telling them, sit down, shut up, and do what we tell you to do. They lose touch with what they want to do, with what they are driven to do. So if your sons are young, I think, and I had a lot of success with this in my own life, if your sons are young, encourage those nuggets of interest and those passions, even if they seem ridiculous to you, right? Like climbing the tree. My gosh, there was a tree outside, my yard, and my kids would try and climb that when they were 3. And the rule was you couldn't have somebody help you up into the tree. You had to be able to get up there yourself before you could get there. So they got really creative. That sounds dumb. It sounds like, how does that encourage motivation? But it's encouraging them to problem solve and self-sufficiency. So when it comes to motivation with bigger boys, it's 2 things. Finding things that they can do that matter to them, and finding things that matter, period. Boys especially are really, really driven to be part of the real world. They want their actions to make a difference. So if they can actively contribute to the community or actively contribute to the family, doing something that fits their interest, you're going to be way better off. One of the big problems with motivation, of course, and we all know this, is often the things that we want to motivate our boys to do are things that they just don't care about at all. I mean, let's face it, none of our boys, and frankly, not even me, I'm not going to get excited about unloading the dishwasher, right? Yeah. That's going to be a challenge, period.
The other piece of that, the other part of that, flipping the script a little bit, is looking at what we do as moms. And we start out with our little boys and we're, following behind them and carrying their backpacks and doing all, getting their lunches ready for them. And, boys are not going to step in and say, hey, Mom, let me get that for you. They're not. So we have to create the vacuum and also the cause and effect. You need to make your lunch or you don't have a lunch. Mm-hmm. Bottom line, here's the stuff for lunch, and let them do. I think we do too much for them from early on, and they just get habituated to like, yeah, Mom will do it.
And let them do in their own way.
Exactly. Because we want to be in control. We want to, we want to make sure that they do it exactly this way or on this timeline. So if we have a chore like the garbage has to be taken out, we have the idea of when we think it should be taken out, but they're in their head, they'll get it done. But meanwhile, we've nagged them to pieces about it. So really being able to state clear expectations and then back off and let them do it.
So I love this conversation. It has taken a lot of emotional intelligence within myself to understand, because I talk a lot about relationship, right? So parent-child relationship, and realizing the gender roles that we are placing on our children at a very young age, and the expectations and the excuses, and how that, I could go on and on and on, but how women are working, they call it the double shift. And I just read an article that called it the double shift. So if you are in a traditional partnership, and so it's you and, a male in your home and you're raising children, it doesn't matter. It could be different partnerships. We're still playing things out. But, the women taking on all these domestic roles, it's interesting to me being in a house full of men and boys, how I've had to consciously uncondition myself that I need to do all these things, probably because I almost died trying to do that. So I just won't do it anymore. But they're very capable of learning how to cook a meal. They're very capable of learning how to do their dishes. And I used to get so frustrated with, and I feel like I'm always putting the teenager under the bus, but he, you learn from the first one. That's like your little guinea pig. And when I was just firm on you're going to make your lunch, And he tried forever to just be like, she's going to bail me out. She's going to bail me out. And it was a few weeks, maybe it was a while where he didn't go to school with the lunch. And I would call the school every day and be like, I just want to let you know I'm not neglecting my child. We're working on this. And I had to do that for my own peace of mind. And then eventually it would be like just a cheese string. And I was like, oh my God, it's awful, blah, blah, blah. And I had to stand firm with my tendency to want to enable or fix or rescue. It's not easy. It's not an easy pattern to break. And I do not want my boys to grow up to be incompetent men who don't know how to lift a finger or pretend they don't know how to lift a finger.
I think that is such a huge fear for boy moms, especially because as females in our households, we are acutely aware of what that imbalance of labor can look like. And so when we see our boys, laying on the couch and playing video games amid a mess, our brains immediately go to, oh my God, I am raising a terrible husband. And I am learning every day, all the time, to try and dial that back. Like, first of all, they're not done yet. So what my son is doing at 15 or at 10 or at 18 is not how he's going to end up. Doesn't mean that I need to excuse everything that he does, but we're back to what Janet says. Their timeline is very different than ours, and their standards are very different than ours. I've been trying to work on the cooking thing, Heather. And part of the issue in my house is that my guys are totally, completely, 100% happy eating pizza, ramen, and burgers all the time. Scrambled eggs, too. They can cook those things, and they're like, why would I ever need to eat anything else?
Oh my. Janet, do you have anything to say with that?
No.
You know what?
You're good.
I'll say this, though. We have been playing a massive game of chicken with the toilet in the upstairs bathroom. Boys are all home. It's been getting progressively worse. Nobody's been cleaning it. I don't want to do it because, oh my God, you are all old enough to know how to clean a toilet, and frankly, old enough to notice the toilet needs cleaning. It cannot always be me. Ladies?
I always have to wipe it first. It's awful.
They're pretty good about that, but it's like, I'm talking in the bowl. It was bad. Yesterday morning, I went to the bathroom and I'm like, it's clean.
Whoa.
It finally got bad enough that the 17-year-old said, this is disgusting. And he cleaned it.
Amazing.
It will happen. Their standards may be different than ours and they're evolving, but he did it.
I love it.
Good job waiting them out on that, Jen.
Whew, it was tough.
It's like you win a gold medal or something. You're just like, oh man, I made it. I just had to sit there, feel my feelings and breathe through it. But seriously, what do people typically do? Oh, well, no one else will do it, so I'll do it, right? And then you're adding more to your plate. And I love this quote, and I think Byron Katie said it, and she says, we teach people how to treat us. And it's the same with our boys and men. My question for you, what keeps coming up for me, and we get this question a lot, especially now, is the conversation around video games and screen time. So it's a loaded question, but curious what you ladies think about this. And is this our video game, male, female, boy, girl, still like video games, but do you know the science behind of what's happening in the mind and your perspective on boundaries around that?
First of all, I would say, and Jen and I think we sound like a broken record, but it's lower your expectations. This is a time unlike any other. So yeah, they're going to play more video games. It is a stress reliever. And I always tell parents, just be sure to balance it with some time outside and relax a little bit. This too shall pass. And Jen, I know you have lots of thoughts about video games.
fell asleep last night to the sound of my 17-year-old loudly playing video games across the hall with friends, via the headset and the internet, well after midnight, because that's what they do now. So right now, video games, well, not just right now, especially for boys, tween and teenage boys, video games are a huge part of how they connect and socialize with their friends. Girls tend to connect and socialize with their friends in other ways, texting, and certainly boys do that too, texting, Instagram, all that stuff. Boys, video game conversations tend to be a major connection point. So there's that. I think another reason why a lot of boys are very drawn to video games, boys are all about overcoming challenges. Boys are all about accomplishing things. And in a lot of ways, we have taken those opportunities from them in real life. We have become very risk averse as a society in general. You hear people talk about free range parenting and, letting kids, versus when we were little, sometimes, you just go out and play and you'll see you 6 hours later and nobody really knows where you are. And that doesn't exist for a lot of our kids today. For a lot of our kids, the only place that they can really find the freedom to experiment and feel a sense of accomplishment is in video games. And I think when parents realize that, you can see a couple of things. And first of all, that it's filling that need, and that if you want your kids to play less video games, spend less time on the screens, you have to have opportunities for them to challenge themselves and take risks and accomplish things in the real world. If their real world opportunity is sit there and be quiet, video games are going to win every time.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, Heather, what you were asking about is what's the difference between typical male, typical female. And in this time, especially, as Jen said, boys are connecting through video games. Boys want to do things together. That is how they communicate. Go out and shoot hoops, go to the skateboard park, whatever those things are. That's their primary way of communicating. Girls can just, we can just look at each other and talk. We don't need to be doing anything. And an interesting anecdote, my friend, her son is a sophomore in high school, and he's not seeing his buddies now. He's playing video games, but another friend wanted to see him and wanted to come over and sit at the end of the driveway and see him. And her son was like, what would we talk about? To just sit and talk? No, so uncomfortable. So that didn't happen, but that just highlights the difference. Girls could sit there and talk all day typically and have plenty to talk about. But for boys, and video games is the catalyst for those connections, for that social interaction.
But it's still okay to have boundaries around them.
Absolutely. And hopefully you're negotiating those boundaries with your child, with your tween, with your teen, that you're not being the dictator, and you're having the conversations and you're saying, I noticed that after 2 hours on the screen, you get a little antsy. What can we do about that? And you get to say, like, there needs to be family interaction. There needs to be cleaning the toilet time, and there needs to be outside time, because that is the antidote to all the screen time.
One of the things that's helped me stay a little bit more sane through this is looking at it over, say, the course of a week instead of any one day. Because there are definitely days where sometimes it's due to weather. Sometimes, the kid got a new game and they just binge and go hard in on a game. If I tried to worry about getting a set balance of outside time and video game time every single day, I would drive myself crazy. And I don't have enough time myself to be the referee for everybody. As long as it basically balances out over the course of a week, I feel pretty good about things.
Yeah, yesterday, I think it was yesterday or the day before. On the weekend, I can actually allow less screen time because I'm not working, right, during isolation. So I was like, no, we're not going to, have a routine. So right now it's like 2 p.m. and on, you can have like your screen time. And that was just for the little ones. But right now they're on the TV. And because I need them to be quiet. And it was 2:00, right? So it was, the routine was there. And I was like, buddy, like I told you previously, like, you're not going to get anything today. And they were just like in a disastrous, angry mood all day. And I'm like, this is just literally your brain detoxing right now. Like, just trying to get off of this routine. I'm like, go outside, go outside. I don't know what to do. I'm bored. And I just let them be. Like, be with all your big emotions. You're allowed to be sad. You're allowed to be angry. Like, feel it. It's not a bad thing. Okay, so recently, and then we'll wrap this up because I know this conversation can go on and on forever. But it is such a sneaky, subconscious, like, starting this conversation with awareness is key. I don't know if our parents had this awareness, or I definitely didn't when you bring your little baby home and you're like, oh, yay. I don't know what I'm getting myself into. I was listening to, what's her name? Oh gosh, Glennon Doyle Milton, her new book, Untamed. And towards the end of the book, she starts talking about, her boys. She has her son, she has had her husband, and how her wife now was saying, you coddle Chase, you allow him to get away with all these things. You don't do that for the girls. And she was like, oh my gosh, I'm allowing his performance, right? Because he was an athlete and he did well in school. I'm allowing all of these things that are performance based come before, serving your family, meaning like you do your own dishes, you do your laundry, you do all of that. They're both important. I'm not going to do all of these things for you because I don't expect these things of your sisters, right? Like, how come they have to do the laundry and follow through with, their kitchen chores? And they still have the same performance-based things out there in the world, but it was so subconscious for her. And she really had to stop and reevaluate. And by doing that, it was interesting to watch his resistance of like, well, my friends' parents don't do this to me. Why is, what's going on? So if you're a woman or a mother or whoever you are, and you're raising boys, or you have a partner who's a male, and that these like subconscious gender roles, or just by who they are there, but you keep telling yourself not this. I think that's the important part, is not discounting how you feel, right? So if the way that you're parenting or the way that your life is set up is just not in alignment, you're like, this is not working for us. You're kind of going, is it an uphill battle? Is there there's going to be resistance. So how do you know when to push, when to back off, when to give, when it's like, that book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. So like, you're communicating with somebody who doesn't communicate the same way as you. How can you really, I guess the question I'm asking is, how can you get your needs met, like your voice heard to the opposite gender or sex? Opposite gender. I mean, sex. Opposite.
Well,
sex.
to me, that's being able to communicate in their language. And so it's less words, fewer words, being really clear. Males typically don't want all the details, so be concise in, this is what I need, X, Y, and Z, period. You don't have to add all the emotions and the reasons and the colors and the detail. And it's like a new language. It's a new way to communicate, but this is an opportunity to practice. And the other piece around that is how you do the talking with them. And that's not face-to-face. That's out walking or riding bikes and sitting on the couch side by side. And it's typically shorter conversations over a longer period of time.
Here's the
patience. Patience is what you're telling me.
Yeah.
The truth is, you can work on communicating it as directly as you can, and you can say it over and over. There is nothing I can do to make sure another person hears and takes in and internalizes what I'm saying. Unfortunately, that part of it really is out of my control. I can't make anybody else, whether it is my husband, my partner, or my children, do anything. And that's frustrating. It's frustrating for all of us, especially as women, as mothers, as partners, when we're dealing with this kind of gender expectations and imbalance. We can say it till we're blue in the face and 16,000 different ways, and it doesn't mean the message will get through. I think it's for me, it's helpful to know that like that's the reality. It doesn't necessarily mean I am doing something wrong. It just means I can't change everybody else.
And taking a stand, kind of like the toilet.
Yeah.
I'm not going to clean this toilet anymore. End of discussion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I reflected on this quite a bit yesterday, actually. As we're recording this, yesterday was Mother's Day. And Heather, I actually heard your voice in my head this week leading up to Mother's Day. How do you want to feel? I didn't want to be martyr, like, oh, look, nobody's doing what I wanted them to do for Mother's Day. So I tried to be explicit and tell my children, this is what I want, which was basically clean up your shit. All the stuff I've been asking you to do for months and weeks, like, do it, actually. Respect me enough to do it, is how I hear it in my head. As I reflected on this, I realized that my children have picked up exactly what I have taught them. Role modeling is truly, I think, the most important and effective parenting technique. And what I have role modeled for my children is that personal interests and passions are more important than housework. My kids know that I will choose to sit on the couch and read a book every day over scrubbing the toilet. They know that. They know that I appreciate and I encourage them to follow their interest. And guess what? That's exactly what we all do. We are all more than willing to step around stuff if it means we can do what's fun. So there's a bit of a conundrum in there for women, right? On the one hand, it's great that they are seeing that their mom is prioritizing her personal interests and her passions over household drudgery, right? I'm not doing that for everybody. The flip side is they are seeing me sitting on the couch, not doing household stuff, and tend to think that they don't have to either. So that's something that we are going to be continually working on here. I've realized I need to role model doing a little bit and involving them in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I personally, it's like sometimes I have to like stand right next to them. I'm like, we're going to do this together as a family rather than just dictating, the chore list. Janet, do you have anything you're going to piggyback on there? No? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I know that I want to laugh because it doesn't matter how old your children are, how long you've been married for, in a relationship. We all have men in our family or in our lives. It's an ongoing learning experience, just like anything else. And every day is a new adventure. So what I'm walking away with from this conversation is it's okay if we're different. We're supposed to be different. And advocating for your boy at home in the classroom because they learn differently doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. And if they do, we didn't really talk about labels or anything like that, but we're designed. It's like comparing apples to oranges, and there's pros and cons to both. Mm-hmm. And there's the yin and the yang, and it's a beautiful thing, and we don't need to control the other just because they're different than us. So any parting words that you have for the women, for the moms that are listening on, they're sitting there going, I just have no idea where to start, what to do. Any parting words that you wish you knew?
I want to say to piggyback on that thought, Heather, is that, and I did this when my kids were little. They're in their 30s now. I raised girls, by the way, not boys. But I always held the notion that I could do it better than my husband. I could put my kids to bed better. I could give them a bath better. I put better in air quotes, but because he did it differently. And I thought my way was the better way and the more effective way. And I really encourage moms to recognize that actually, if you have a dad around your kids, you don't want him to parent the way that you do. You need him to parent differently. Your kids need him to parent differently, boys and girls. And we need the energy of males and females in raising kids. And whether you're, a household of two moms, your boy still needs to have those males in his life that can, give him the high fives and the fist bumps and all the things, because we as women, we may think we can give all of that to our boys, and we can't. It's impossible. So make sure that he does have lots of males around him. Yes. I think that's really essential.
And when I was a single mom, I think I wasn't single when I met you, Janet, but even just having men around my son was awesome. Because I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't get this, right? We need both in our lives. And programs like Big Brothers, Big Sisters, things like that, if you are a single parent, is really, really important if there is no male role models there. Mm-hmm. Jen, what's your parting words?
Look for the sparks. The sparks are those little glimmers of our personal gifts and interests and passions, and your sons have them. Your partners have them. We are not all the same. We do not all have the same gifts in the world, and that's the beautiful thing. So often we want everybody to think and do things our way, but let's be honest, that would drive us crazy. I have a hard time living with myself sometimes. A whole house full of me would be crazy. So when you find yourself getting frustrated, and it will happen, try and take a moment and think about those unique sparks and try and focus your attention on appreciating that, and think about how together you come together to make the world a better place.
I love that. And just helping your children cultivate that. It's a beautiful thing. And I think about how even my husband, because I create a lot of space for my sparks, like my own personal sparks. I have to. It's just in my business. I have to be creative. And sometimes it's hard for partners to be able to do that, or it could be the opposite, right? Where they give lots of opportunity for their sparks and you don't give any for yours. And sometimes you just got to push them into the spark a little bit and be like, go. And it's just amazing when you see them something that lights them up.
Yes. And it's hard, especially when we're all stressed out right now. My husband and I had a conversation about that this weekend. I am going so hard on some of my stuff, and he is going so hard on some of his. And we're caught up in our own worlds and fail to appreciate the challenges the other is experiencing with. Same is true for our kids. So look at those sparks, flame them when you can, and then gather around the fire.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, Jen.
Oh, yeah. You're like, yeah.
I'm a writer, you guys.
Bring marshmallows, because those boys want to eat.
Hell yeah.
Well, thank you, ladies. So what are you individually up to? What are you collectively up to? And where can people find you?
You can find us at onboyspodcast.com collectively, and individually, I'm at boysalive.com. And if you go to boysalive.com/guide, there's a free 20+ strategies for navigating parenting during Corona chaos.
And I am at buildingboys.net. And if you go there, you will see my newsletter sign up. I launched a subscription newsletter within the last few months. And if you click today, you will get to learn about my Mother's Day and why watching Juice WRLD with my kids was actually really amazing.
That's amazing. Love it. Thank you. Thank you. I know we could continue this conversation forever. Just another layer of the onion to pull back on how to feel in control.